We want to say good evening and good afternoon and good morning wherever you're viewing us from. We want to say welcome to Family Connection International, on the program Keeping in Touch, the program where we share life-changing experiences and stay connected. And as always, we are here every Friday and every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So we always have Ben and Levi with us. Levi is behind the scene doing some work. We also have a guest with us today. We'll be introducing our guest very shortly. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. As you know, currently I'm speaking to you from Houston, Texas, after a long time of drive over to this place from actually Baltimore. That is like about 21 hours drive. I'm right now transiting in Texas. So I'm glad that I can be on the show and made it possible to be on the show with you guys today. And I'm looking forward to what our guest speaker, Apostle Moses Foya, has for us.
Yep, very sure. Today we have with us the Apostle Moses Foya, a missionary and a founder of the Living Water Fellowship International Church in Louisville, Kentucky, a general overseer of Living Water Fellowship of Churches and Ministries. He holds a Master's of Arts degree in Human Services. He's a life coach, a professional counselor, and a Master of Divinity in Mission Study from Liberty University. We will be leading our discussion today on the decline of cultural identity in today's society. Why and how can people assimilate with other culture and still be able to maintain their cultural identity? This is a huge question that we'll be looking at tonight. It affects every one of us. So I want to say, Apostle, welcome tonight, and thank you for taking up your time to be with us.
Thank you, Jonah.
And we just want to start this thing rolling. I think we'll expect some people to join us later as discussion goes by, those who are monitoring, if they are not there. I think this, normally we have a 1 hour during our monthly program, but this, if we have a bigger crowd, we'll take it to an hour, 30 minutes. I don't know whether the apostle have the time to be here for that time. But apostle, I know we'll go to discuss our topic for the day, but we want our viewers to know who we're talking to. Maybe tell us a little about a family. I know you married, your wife, how many children you have. And I know you've been in ministry for over 27 years or so. Just a little bit of a review of who we're talking to today for our viewers to know exactly.
By calling, I'm a minister of the gospel. I was ordained in the Bethel World Outreach Ministries and later on a ministry called Living Word Missions. And then I worked as a missionary in Liberia. Of course, when I graduated from Bible school, went up to Foya, where I'm from, started a Bible school there in 1989. Then became the director of Living Water Ministries in Liberia, and then went on to Ivory Coast. We started Bible schools there, which are still thriving. Then we moved to the States in 2001, started a church here called Living Water Fellowship International. So we are what we call, traveling missionaries, itinerant missionaries. But my wife and I have been doing this for the past, we started in 1986, which is 34 years now. Our children who are now adults. We have 5 children. All of them are here in the States. Some of them are nurses, some of them are artists, some of them, they are in different professions. So we thank God for his goodness and his grace and his mercy upon us. Our passion is to help to train the body of Christ, to train people to realize their purpose for which God created them, because everybody has a purpose for which God created them and put them on the face of this earth. And we want them to realize that purpose, because if you don't realize that purpose, you would always be like a ship without any rudder. You just be going all around the place. That's a purpose. There's a time where you're trying to find out, but before you leave this earth, you have to fulfill that purpose. So that's what we're trying to put into people. We are here to equip the body of Christ.
Thank you so much.
So now, as you know, our discussion today has to do with cultural identity. I just heard from you in your introduction how you serve as a missionary. In Liberia, you've also been to places like Ivory Coast in West Africa, and obviously you are in the United States of America. What was it like, you leaving from Liberia, going to Ivory Coast as a missionary?
Well, if we take it from the example. I don't want to be too theological here, but if we take it from the example of Jesus Christ, he left the heavenly culture and he came to the earthly culture. Okay, so but the Bible clearly says in Philippians 2 that he emptied himself. Did not hold on to his bingo. He emptied himself. So that is a clear example of what we call cultural identity. Okay, if you leave your own country like we left Liberia and you go to the Ivory Coast, it's a different culture, because culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people. So the characteristics of people in Liberia is quite different from the characteristics of people in the Ivory Coast. And even there's a culture in a culture in a culture. So it can be very complicated at times. There are subcultures. Okay, so if you're leaving from Liberia as an English-speaking person and you go into a French-speaking nation, they think quite differently. You see, so what you got to do to identify with that culture where you are going is to first of all empty yourself. That is, you gotta begin to not think as a Liberian. If you want to identify with these people, you gotta begin to empty yourself so that you could be able to understand and assimilate with these people, just like what Jesus did. He emptied himself and became a man. He was God and he's still God, but he became a man. He identified with us, for him to help us. If I go as a missionary to help people, to teach them, it's not only about you going to teach them, but what are the people going to teach you? See, yeah, you got to be able to be willing to learn. Now, that is in a spiritual sense. But let's take the natural sense. If I had just gone to the Ivory Coast as a worker, maybe let's say I went there as an expert, accountant, or let's say working with the government or an NGO. The tendency for people is to go to dominate the other people's culture, which we find in colonialism. For example, the British left, we know the partition of Africa in the 1800s. They left their cultures. They went to dominate other cultures. That is what is called cultural colonialism, which has very negative effects even up to us today in Africa, where we have been culturally dominated. That is in a negative sense, and that is cultural pride. That is something we need to stay away from. I cannot leave from Liberia, go to the Ivory Coast, and carry my culture, because every culture has its own baggages. Every culture has its own advantages. So if you go to a culture and you go to a people, you have to strike a balance between the culture that you already know, which has formed you already, and you have certain, we call it norms, behavior, or values, thinking, because these are things that form part of culture, your behavior, which are the norms, the way you behave, and the way you think, things that have been inculcated in you from the time you were a child. You cannot deny them. But for you to be culturally competent, you have to be able to think before you act at times, so that you are not just acting out of your own bias to other people. Or else, as a missionary, or even as an expert, if I go to the Ivory Coast, I'll be a failure, because I will be thinking my culture is superior to that of those who I'm with. I have to strike a balance.
That's a great point to start with. I appreciate that, and thank you for the insight that we have begun to get from you as it relates to our major point of discussion today. Brother Fasa, you want to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Now we on the real topic for the day. You rightly said that culture is a custom or act or social institution and achievement of a particular nation or people or other social group, whatever a group were agreed upon. My concern has to do with our children. We speak our vernacular, our tribe, what I would say is, but our children we have today cannot speak this tribe, meaning we're trying to not get them to speak the tribe because of certain reason. Maybe we're not speaking it to them. What is happening to us?
It's what we call cultural domination. We have been dominated mentally. Okay, that's what is happening. Because, for example, I was born in Sierra Leone actually. So my father crossed over, to Sierra Leone when he was a young man. He left Liberia, crossed over to Sierra Leone, and entered the army, went to the Second World War, came back and came home. Got my mother from Piwang, that area in Kenya. Okay, but these are the people who are Gizi people. We have the clans. Okay, and I'm from the Tengia clan. Okay, fine. So, but when we were growing up in our home, our father and mother spoke Gizi to us. Why? Because they had not gone to a formal English school. Okay, that concept, they were in what we call a city, but the primary way they communicated, which language is a very powerful part of culture. Some people communicate in words, in actions, in mannerisms. Language is very important. So that's why I would come again to the other side. If you want to dominate a people, you dominate their language. You change their language. Okay? So that is what we should be thinking, is that we, especially people of African origin, that we're talking about ourselves now, we are not like our fathers who spoke the language to us from birth. That's why you and I probably, we know the language, we speak it. But we who have gone to school now in the Western educational system have grown up, and our thinking, our behavior, our way of thinking has been kind of changed in a sense that we think now that I got to speak English to make it, to be successful. Okay, for people to consider me educated or an intellectual, I have to speak English, and we do our best, to master the English language, or if it's the French language, to master that, rather than mastering our cultural language that we have. And so our children that we are bringing up, they see that. Because you don't only train children by what you say, it's by what you are doing. And so they see that. And we do not even speak the language to them. So in their mind, even if we don't say our culture is inferior, but they are thinking that way, because we are not projecting this image that we have a great culture. Because if we have a great culture, then we should be talking about it. We should be telling them stories in our culture. We should be telling them, the names. Recently, it was only recently that I bought a book for $250 from Germany. It's a Gizi dictionary. It's a big book. It was dedicated, if you know, it was dedicated to the paramount chief, late paramount chief, Tiller, Namatilla. I have the book right here. And some of my children now, most of them don't speak Gizi, the language, our cultural language, but they began to see, when I bought that book, they began to say, this must be important to Dad. I have to buy this dictionary. Some of them started borrowing it to begin to learn some of the words, to begin to learn some of the history, to begin to learn some of the adages, our culture, the names, why we give certain names that way. So they began to love the culture more. So if you go with if you know my children, some of them, now you go on their Facebook pages, they major more now. Instead of them calling himself Joseph, he wants to say, I'm Tamba, I'm Tamba. Or instead of saying I'm I'm Jonathan, they want to say I'm Saab, So they're getting to know more. So they see the importance of it, because they know the norms, how we behave, why we do things the way we do it. But we were not doing it to them when they were growing up. So if you ask me that question, I would say blame should lie on us, parents who are raising up children in a Western culture and not speaking the language. Now look at people like let's give the example of the Chinese, the Japanese. They have children like all of us here. but their children do speak Chinese. Why? Because they do know that the more they speak it and talk about their culture at home, those children, I don't care what you do, they are born here, if they are born here, they would always know English because they are in that environment. But we have to make that purpose in our own self that we got to be speaking our language to them from that, and they will get it. And we show the importance of it, tell them the history, tell them the stories, tell them our history, where we come from, you know, all of these things, how we operate. Just tell them, just like you and I, who grew up there in some of where we're coming from, we know most of the norms, we know most of, but do we transmit that to our children? So I believe that there has been a kind of the link, a lack of the link between us and the next generation in transmitting what we know and transmitting who we are, our identity. That's why people are losing, we are losing our identity, you know. I mean, I'm not prolonging the answer here. I mean, people left from here, the United States missionaries. All of us know people like Kamba Sayaning, who are missionaries that left from here. They went and give us a written language, man. You can see women who never knew English, but they can read the Bible in their own language. So the people made sure that our language did not die, you know. But we now, are we telling our children these things? Are we telling them that our language is written down? You can read our language. You can, because let me tell you, if you think in your own innate language that you were born into, you are more creative. That's why people, Japanese, you don't go to Japan and the people are speaking English in their factories. No, they speak Japanese, Chinese. They speak Chinese. They are very creative. All of these people. But look at Africa. We who have been colonized and we have taken these norms and behaviors from Western nations. You know, it's like we have lost. We are lost. We do not know what we are, where we are going. We do not know. We are in between, especially a nation. This is what I think about a nation like Liberia. That was, we don't want to even go into that period. Let me just stop right here.
I know you rightly mentioned that our parents told us stories and they taught us when we were much younger and coming up. It was very beautiful. But now our children believe that their teachers are more, they even believe their teachers more than their parents. Because I can tell you case in point, my daughter was in the 5th grade and she came home. She had a math assignment. And I tried to help her with the math assignment. She said, no, my teacher did not tell me this. So where are we today?
Again, it comes down to what image we are projecting. For example, are we taking our children back to where we came from? Do we take them, put them on a plane, spend the time, and then for them to go spend time in that environment where all of us came from? I believe that if they, not only by what we say, but if they experience it, you know, and they experience the culture, like I personally, my wife especially has taken our daughters who were very little when we were up in Fuya, but has taken them back when they were even graduated from college. You know, they went and saw their grandmothers, you know, and their aunties and uncles. And now more and more they are falling in love with the nation and with that culture. So they want to go back and do something, you see? So if you mention like your daughter coming in and, you know, and contradicting whatever you're saying, yeah, it's not an issue to force things on them. But, you know, just probably one day make a trip with them, you know, because it's never too late actually to change people's thinking and people's mentality. Now we have lost ground in that our children have no idea of what our language is like, because, you know, language is a very, very important part of a vehicle of transmitting our culture. But still, I believe that we can still communicate to them by example. You know, what do we portray to them? For example, you, three of us here, I don't know, other people will be coming in. We have on our traditional garb, traditional dresses. This is something I didn't just put this on today because I want to be here, but I've done this. People know me. This is what I wear all the time, even when I'm ministering, I'm preaching. And most times, even here in America, I don't really put on suits to preach or to minister. You see, these are all images that we have to develop so that our children are seeing that, and they're seeing that this is very important to dad, this is very important to mom. Our culture must be a great culture. So that will begin to inculcate an image into them that, hey, I got to know my background, where I'm coming from. So there will be no disassociation from the background of where they are coming.
That's great. We want to let our viewers know that this is Family Connection International, the program Keeping in Touch. Today we have with us as our guest, Apostle Moses Foya. We're discussing our culture, what is happening to our culture, losing our cultural identity, how can we try to maintain it. If you have a comment, just drop us a comment on our last Facebook feed. We're going to read your comment. If you have a question, just go ahead and do that, and our guests will be able to address that. Ben.
Apostle Foya, thank you again so much for all the insight that you continue to give us. There was something that you talked about which has to do with being culturally competent. And I would like for you to throw a little light on that. What is it? What are the ingredients of someone being culturally competent?
Okay, cultural competence has to do more with the other culture that you're gonna come across. Okay, so for example, like in America, they talk about integration. When people leave from other cultures and they immigrate here, they talk about integrating into this culture. But if somebody is 50 years of age, okay, and they leave from whatever culture, whatever African culture, Indian culture, Chinese, and they come here, it's gonna be difficult for them to just leave and share, their cultural background. No, that's why you always have these subcultures. So if you have in America here, you hear about Chinatown, you hear Hispanic speaking their Spanish all the time. They're doing their own culture. You have about Jamaicans, and we Liberians, we get together during like Independence Day, and we talk the way we usually talk. You could see it. A Liberian goes to work. The English there is different, and he comes, home and maybe talking to his fellow Liberians. The English there is different. Things like so. That means that we are being culturally competent in that sense that, hey, if I need to function in America, I got to copy some of the way Americans behave, some of the way they talk, some of the way they speak. If I continue to just use my Liberian parlance, I'm not gonna make it. Okay, so I got to begin to, change. That is what is called cultural competence. Now, also on the opposite end of that, if I'm a pastor, if I train to minister to people, and let's say I'm put in a congregation where there are, and I've seen people make this kind of mistake, and some people are wondering, like people who are Liberian pastors here in America, usually they're wondering, man, why are these white people or these Americans not coming to my church? Well, you are speaking like a Liberian, that's, and then you call people to give testimony, they're talking in Liberia, they give you an example. I always see that. They give examples like, other people are Americans, they are here, and they say, oh, I remember during the war, we were in Banga, man, the thing was high, it was tough. I remember we were eating, this, there were no pusawa. This is in America, right? And these people are sitting down there, and you're talking about Slipway, and you're talking about West Point, and you don't give any reference. Like, okay, during the war, there was a civil war. You explain it. There was a civil war in our nation between this time and this time. Well, during that civil war, we left the capital city, Monrovia, to the second city called Banga. Okay, then you are being culturally competent because you are trying to explain to these people, for them to understand the point that you are coming. And you can't just say Liberia. Just say, okay, Liberia, that is nation on the west coast of Africa. It was founded by freed slaves from this place. So you give them at least a background, you know, so they can understand and say, oh, okay, we know what they're talking about. You know, it's like an American coming and making a joke and you don't laugh. And they say, why aren't you laughing? Well, because I don't understand the joke. I don't understand it because jokes have history behind them. Mm-hmm. You know, that makes people laugh. So you make the joke, I don't laugh. I say, I was not born here. You know, you got to tell me the background of the joke. That is being culturally competent. So if I'm trained as a minister here and they put over a church, which is mostly Americans, brother, I got to change the way I begin to communicate. I'm being culturally competent. If these people come to me for counseling, I cannot be thinking in my own, for example, the culture that we come from, you and I, is mostly a communal culture. Talk about community, we do things in community. Okay, Americans are individualistic. So if that person comes to me for counseling and, you know, and I start telling them, you need to listen to, you know, your uncle. You need to listen to your grandmother. You know, I mean, you are not being culturally competent because in this culture it's individualistic. That person is saying, I have the right, I'm free, I can do anything I want to do. That's the way they think, that is their norm. Okay, so to be culturally competent, I got to understand from where they are coming from. So in any profession that you do, people will teach you about cultural competence. Even you counseling people, they will tell you that if someone comes to you, even doctors, okay, if I go and I see a female doctor as my doctor, immediately my cultural background is going to show up. And I said, well, really, I'm not ready to take off my shirt in front of you, you know. Now, that doctor has to understand my culture. Okay. That is being culturally competent. You cannot say, hey, no, in every profession now, they're teaching about cultural competence, how to get into the mind of the next person and to understand why they do what they are doing and why they behave the way they behave and don't just be critical, okay? Then you will not be effective. Most of the books that you and I read in schools and doing things, they are written based upon Western culture, okay? Yeah. So they are not sensitive to other cultures. So now they are trying to integrate some of the other cultures into some of the way people practice and think here. See? So that's, you know, if you ask that question, these are some of the things that we have to really do to strike this balance that I've been talking about.
And I say you are right there on point with all that you have said. It's just the basic of it, knowing, having the mindset of the other person as a professional person, right? Yeah. For example, maybe you are in the mental health area, as you said, and you are dealing with other people from different backgrounds and different clients come to you. You have to kind of know their background. You have to know their culture. How do they perceive things from their side of the equation, so that you can be able to kind of draw them into whatever conclusion that you might have at the end of the day, and for them to be able to agree with you if they know that you actually know or understand your situation. Then definitely you'll be able to break through with some barriers that might be on the way in overcoming whatever challenge that they have mentally or emotionally, in a sense or so. So that's for sure. You need to know the culture of the other person that you are dealing with. You don't just have to stay with yours and say, I'm going to look at it from my point of view. Yes, you can look at it from your point of view, but also consider the other person's point of view or how they were brought up. Because I remember back in the days when I was even going to school and my grandparents registered me to go to school. When I go to school, I expect to learn how to read and write or speak English. But when I go back home, I'm not going to speak English to my grandmother, for that matter, who I was staying with at the time, because when I speak the English to her, it will be an insult. So I have to speak our traditional language in the house with them so that they can understand me and I will be able to understand them as well. And that helped me along the way as I grew up. I got to know a lot of stuff in my tradition because of that. So that is a very good point to bring across as we deal with for the new generation of people or our kids that we have. They don't speak the local languages that we expect them to speak except for English. And even if you have a family discussion, you have to do it in the open, in the sense that you have nothing like a secret. to discuss with, because English is universal and everybody would need to learn that. So thank you for that insight, and I appreciate that. Brother Fasa?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. I will agree with you, especially when you touch on the dress code. I remember when I had an opportunity to go to Japan for training, and after our training, we had a program, and I wore an African attire. I think it was a lini with some design in it. And the Japanese guys looked at me and he told me to go and get dressed. I told him I was dressed. In fact, the attire I'm wearing is even more expensive than the coat suit the guy who is wearing. I have to educate him to my culture. And he accepted me, and I went through the training and the closing program. So it's about telling the next person what your culture is and what you believe in. Which brings me to this point, Apostle, about parenting. And in America, those days when we were growing up, it's mommy and daddy is coming home from work. You see the kids running to go embrace mommy and daddy. But now our kids in this modern world, you coming home, they are all glued to their electronics. It's not even easy if they even say hi to you. It's very, sometimes one is on a computer, on their iPad, on an Xbox or whatever. Sometimes they don't even say hi. What can we do with this situation?
I mean, it's a challenging situation. I mean, this is not only true for even here in the Western world. Even if you go to African nations, I mean, they've been dominated by social media and all that's happening. I mean, this is all over the world now. You know, people are on their phones. People are. I mean, imagine all of our grandmothers, like you know, Ben was referring to his grandmother. Those grandmothers on the farm now, they got cell phones. You know. You can be here and you call them. They know how to manipulate that object, you know, and answer your call. So this thing is affecting everywhere. But the only thing I see is that we have as parents, and I have adult children now, I don't have that luxury anymore. But for those of you, us who are still nurturing children, maybe babies, people who are still in their teens and all of that, I mean, you got to choose to set boundaries. Definitely. That's why you are a parent, you know? And that is another thing also, because we think that, okay, in this Western culture, and we hear, you know, like one of my brothers, they moved here, and he called me on one time and said, "Can you believe this, brother? What's happening?" One of my children called the police on me, you know? And he was like, and all of that. I said, well, from the time you brought them here, have you been sitting down with them and teaching them and telling them, you people have come here, but this is what you expect of them? He said, well, really, no, they just go to school. Well, these children are going to school every day, and they are telling them all of their rights. They're telling them this, they're telling them that, telling them that. So that is, they are being, in other words, positively brainwashed in a sense. So, all of the concepts that you have taught them from little about respect, about listening to mom and dad, and some of these things now they're teaching them mostly independence and how, you know, but our children here and some of them now return. When we were in Africa, my children never mentioned the age 18, but when we came here, they started mentioning the age 18. I can't wait to be 18. You know, that's what they're teaching them here. But from the formative stage, for those of the children who are born here, we have to set up a system of training them. Train a child in the way that it should go. When they are old, they will not depart from it. But I think most of the time it's just a laissez-faire thing. What will happen will happen. We are not doing, and we don't have a goal. We don't have a purpose for the children, and we're not directing them in what to do. Even choosing the books that they read at home, and choosing the time that they spend on television. But just like we provide these things for them, just leave them. But there are people here, even who are born here as Westerners, who set up a regimen of system that they would not allow their children to be influenced by the culture at large, you know, because the family is the one that projects culture. The government projects culture. Our faith projects culture, but the family is the unit that actually influences culture more, you know. So we, for those children, the responsibility, I believe, is given to parents, especially if the mother and father are in agreement to nurture those children at the age that they are, are still malleable, that is still able for you to change the way you think. But if you just, I think parents are just letting it go. And again, that's because of the way the society is here. Parents are working. Both parents go home, go to work. And most of the time, the children come home and they are on their own most of the time before the parents, don't even get to see or sit down at the same table with the children. So I think it's a concerted effort, and it has to be something that's deliberate, something that's purposed, that we have to set up a system where we're going to make sure that our children will be this way. Unfortunately, we as, let me say Liberians, since I'm a Liberian, do not have a system that we have like back home where, like we say, a child is brought up by a village. We do not continue that system here. Here we come and we are all kind of divided and apart. But I think if we develop that kind of system again where everybody is congregates at a certain time together and our children seeing that, I think they will see the importance of some of our own cultural norms and that they'll be able to follow them.
That's so true. Which brings me to music and food. Are we playing our cultural music at home? Because all the children listen to is just R&B, rap, and whatever. I don't even understand some of the things I listen to. Are we still playing our traditional music in our homes? Are we still cooking our traditional food what our kids will love it? Is this still happening? If it's not happening, how can we make it happen?
I don't know about you guys, but for us, our children don't like any Western food, even though I grown now. From the time we came here, I know African dishes are very expensive here, and things. But if you don't have that palm oil in that soup, the children are not eating it. So again, that's because the brothers in the home were from childhood, they have been used to eating our own dishes. So that's what they're used to. See, it's what you expose to the child from the time they are in the nurturing stage. Them up, with the music, of course, that's again, it's different. Again, this is what we have relegated our music. How much of our own cultural music do you hear on the radio? How much of our, if you go to Liberia, what are you going to hear on the radio? What are you going to hear on television? It's Western music. Are you going to hear most of the cultural music? No, we don't hear it because people think it's like already, we don't say it, but we're already thinking it that it's not important. It's call it as like country music, man. So if we have developed that kind of mentality, what will our children do? So they're gonna listen to different kinds of music, or even if it's not our own culture in the sense of a tribal music, and all of that. But if we even expose them to our own artists, there are good rappers in Liberia. Believe it or not, they may not be famous, but they are good, very good in rapping. I've listened to some of their music. Expose it to them. This is what Nigerians do. Why is Nigerian music famous in America? White people, Westerners are listening to Nigerian music and they want to, Nigerian movies, they want to see them. Nigerian movies are on Netflix. Why? Because those people are determined to project their culture. First of all, you and I, are we doing that?
I know. This is what is happening all over this place. Ben, anything from your end?
Again, for those of you that are listening to us out there, follow us. This is a program of Family Connection International on the forum Keeping in Touch. And today we are discussing with our guest speaker, Apostle Moses Foya, and he's discussing with us on the topic culture and how can we maintain our identity from wherever we might have come from. We all came from different backgrounds, from different cultures. How can we be able to assimilate with the area that we found ourselves, for example, in the Western world, and also be able to maintain our original identity as Africans in that area. Pastor Moses Foya, we appreciate your being here with us today, and we'll continue to kind of absorb all of the information that you are giving us. It makes me to think that if not all, most people must make it their responsibility to make a research on being culturally competent, because if you are culturally competent, it will help a lot to overcome some of the hurdles that we go through, especially when you talk about being culturally shocked. You know, you wouldn't be culturally shocked if you already kind of informed with regards to other cultures surrounding you, or you are informed within your environment how other people behave and why they behave the way they behave. Having said that, I would come up to a point to say, what would be your advice? Because from your experience being culturally competent and being able to assimilate well, because I remember you are giving an example of being able to preach and knowing your audience. You don't want to be giving stories about things that happen back in Africa that people have no clue about. We're not in Africa, we're in the Western world. So when you give an example, you have to give practical example with people that people will understand what you're talking about. So what would be your advice to people that try to sometimes enforce their culture on other people that they are interacting with, or they are in connection with? What would you say in those type of situations? How can they actually be able to assimilate and convey their message, and at the same time be able to maintain their culture? Pastor Moses, if you hearing me, it appears that you are muted.
You gotta unmute your phone, yeah.
Unmute yourself, please.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. I've given 5 points on how to maintain your culture when moving to another country. Okay, how to maintain, that is maintaining your own culture. Now, that doesn't mean that you are not culturally competent. The thing is, cultural competence is about trying to be in another person's shoes, especially to understand where the other person is coming from, what is their concept, how do they think.
Yeah.
You know, like the example was given of when America started establishing factories in China the first time. You know, some of the American people, they thought, you know, China was like America, and then, you know, the guy who set up the factory, you know, he saw, he's an American, set up the factory, and he saw one of the employees, you know, stealing something from the factory and taking it. So the American guy went to the supervisor, who was a Chinese guy, you know, and told him, he said, I saw one of the employees, and this was during the time of Mao Zedong, you know, stealing some things from the factory, because he thought that in American culture, you're stealing from the factory, they just fire you, right? And you're gone. They leave you. No, but they took the guy, put him behind the house, and shot him to death for stealing. Okay, so that is what we call, the man was not culturally competent. He didn't understand how that society behaves. That you go to a place like Japan, and you meet a group of people, the first person that you greet is the oldest person. You don't start from the young man like Americans do, like the children first, they will come and kneel down to, hey, you know, before they even talk to the father. Oh, it doesn't happen like that in Japan. You know, you go to the oldest person first. If you are culturally competent and you want to have, you know, your way forward in that culture. So in that sense, we have to be culturally competent. But that doesn't mean that we denigrate or reduce our own culture to nothing. That is, we deculturize ourselves and to integrate. No. You know, I've sworn to be an American citizen, you know, definitely. But that doesn't mean that I swore an oath to, you know, to leave my culture behind. No, I did not do that. Okay. Now, I swore allegiance to the flag in America, but that doesn't mean I leave my cultural beliefs and all of that, you know, behind. No way. So I maintain them. although I want to be culturally competent. So how do I maintain them? Number one, it says stay in touch with people from back home. Yeah, you got to stay in touch with your people, from back home, because there are some of us who usually think that, I've come to this highly industrialized nation. People now are backward, they don't know anything. How many of us even know some of the proverbs? The wisdom that is in some of the proverbs our people give. How many of us even know those proverbs? How many of us know some of the medications that our people used? That the same thing that we condemned, this is the one that the people selling to us here now. They're telling us about they rub mud on their faces. This is the one that people use when the people coming out of the Sunday society, they rub it on the children for several weeks and their faces are shining. But we condemn that. But they are selling it to us in bottles. Okay? Coconut. Now they're telling us to drink coconut water. They have it in bottles, expensive in supermarket. This is what we usually condemn. We go over there. People are selling coconut all over the place. We say, we want to drink Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is killing people. It's sugar, But these are some of the things. So we have to not always look down, because we are in this country, on our own culture. There's wisdom there. There's a type of civilization there. For example, we know about Gizi culture. Our people created money before Western nations created money. We call it the Gizi penny. Okay? Yeah, that's part of our civilization. It was there all the time. Okay? These are some of the things that we need to begin to teach our children if we know about the history of our people. So we should maintain that touch. How do we maintain that touch? Not only calling on phone, but no, going back there and learning things. Learning some of the things that our people learn, taking our children there, they get to see things, they get to learn new things. They would know, I would take them there. That's how we maintain that contact from people back home. Number two, join local clubs. I don't know whether we have, from our own perspective, whether we have join local clubs that give you ties to your culture. There are people here there was even an organization, I believe there's a friend of ours, I think he's a pastor, James Fayombo. They used to do the Gizi translation back in Lofa in the days. And he was trying to say something about teaching our children the Gizi language. But it did not take off because nobody kind of supported it. But these are some of the things that I believe that maybe people can come together to learn, for our children to learn some of these our languages. My children, they yearn now today. They wish that they knew our tribe. They wish that they could speak it. Because most of the time, if my wife and I want to hide something from them, we don't have to go in the room. We just sit right there and talk. They're not hearing it, and they say, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And all of that. We say, "Well, you need to learn it." So they desire to learn it. So we should maintain that contact with if any local thing here that connects us to that culture. We should maintain our tradition, cultural traditions. What are some of the traditions that you and I know? I'm throwing this question out to you, for you, both of you. What are some of the traditions that you know that could be valuable?
And they're asking a question. What are some of the traditions that you know that could be valuable? Let's start from you, Ben.
Well, one thing I know is knowing seniority in a home is very important. That is to say, an elderly person being considered as an elderly person, and when they give you an instruction because they are an elderly person, we expect the younger one to listen. Sometimes, even if the younger one will not want to listen, but because this person is an elderly person in the home, they are to some extent compared to listening. They say, well, my bigger one have already spoken. I have nothing to add or subtract from it. That would be something to think about.
And just to add up to what Ben is saying, I have a senior brother who brought me up. Whenever he called me to do something, if I was working, I would leave my work just to do what he asked me to do. Though it might not be at my own will, but just because he's an older brother, I decide to do his part before I come back to do what I need to do. But that's not the case for our people growing up today.
But that's what we need to teach them. For example, I wrote a thesis the other time about my own cultural background, and I introduced to her. I said, in the Gizi culture, I said we don't have a name for uncle. Actually, we don't have a name for on our father's side. There are no uncles on the father's side. There are uncles on the mother's side. Okay, so I explained that, and people are kind of like, "What?" I said, "Yes, your father's brother is not your uncle; he's your father. Okay, your father's elder brother is your big pa. Okay, and your father's younger brother is your small father. Okay, now your mother's brothers are your uncles. Your mother's sisters are your small mothers. Okay, so that's how it works. So, for example, my younger brother here, I'm older than him. I'm father. He's Nyuma. The daughter calls me dad. Yeah, Father's Day the other day, she sent me a gift to dad. Okay, these are some of the things that we need to teach our children for them to know that the family is interconnected. We don't think too much about, here they think about nuclear family in the sense of father, mother, and their children, these other uncles, cousins, they are far people, No, we don't think that way. So these are some of the things that we need to inculcate into them and teach them and say, this is how it works. Okay? And do we call some of them by their Gizi names culturally? The Sa, the Tambas, the Fayez and the Halif. Do we call them those names? Do we give them even those names for them to know that these are automatic names? You don't have any choice about it. You have that name when you are born. It's there. Okay? These other names that we come, they are imported names. They are not cultural names. That's just how it is. If we continue to inculcate that, they will see the importance. Oh, our people have a system. They had a system, how things work. That's how it is. Yeah, and we do know also that in the Gizi culture, the uncles have the blessing. That is your mother's brothers. They have your blessing. See? So if we begin to inculcate that, they will begin to look to their mothers, brothers, as people that they need to respect. That's just how these things work. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Apostle Moses Foya. We appreciate your time being with us here today and for all the insight that you have given us into this topic of discussion, which is culture and how can we maintain our identity and at the same time be able to assimilate with other cultures. We appreciate that. I know in Liberia, we have about 16 different tribes. I would say 16 different cultures. We have other countries in West Africa and even in other parts of the world that have different cultures. We all need to know what is our culture and how can we maintain that culture. I wish we had more time to discuss, but it appears that we are already caught up with time, and time is the most perishable commodity. It perishes faster, even more than tomatoes. So thank you so much, and I want to turn it over to Brother Fasta in the studio there.
Thank you so much, man. Apostle, before we go, there's a comment from Pastor Daniel Sa, who is in the Netherlands. He said, thank you guys, very important topic. I think we have lost a lot, especially our Kisi tribe. What can we do to redeem this lost culture as a Kisi people? That's his concern.
Well, that question, I think, is to all of us who are from that culture. What can be done? But these are some of the things that we're talking about. What can we start, like organizations? I know that, like here, we hear about, how do they call the organization? You people are part of it.
They got some Kisi organization called the Umplor.
The Umplor, that they have NAPLA.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, there are positives to it. There are also negatives. I found out that Kisi people are very, very competitive. That is part of us. We need to face that. There are negative part of it. Competition can be good, but it could be negative. But what I believe that could be done is that these organizations, if they could come into one and be able not only to mostly promote, the culture. Yeah, it could be developmental oriented, but I think mostly it's supposed to be geared towards education. Educating the new generation about who we are as a people, where we are coming from, our history, why we do what we do, the way we do it. And I think if it is that way, in whatever way we can, it could be done. Now, we have to be careful though, because there has to be struck a balance. I can say this, because we have what we call cultural churches. I even heard that some of the churches now, who are mostly dominated by people of our own tribe, they do not want anybody from any other tribe to lead that church. I mean, that is something I don't want to get into. But what I'm just saying here is that we have to have a definite plan of bringing those of us who are in the diaspora to set up organizations that are mostly oriented towards education, and the way people can transmit the culture. I think it was recently, well, we didn't go forward further with that, but Ben was involved with us. We started what we call Yungu Meleka, something like that. And one of the things was to develop our culture. And we started talking to people like the Ome Kabakole, who are people that know our culture, to start teaching people, but it didn't get off the ground, unfortunately. But I believe that is not a lost cause. Anybody can pick up on that. And, this could be a forum if more people participate for something like that to develop, mostly to conscientize, to create awareness as a people of who we are.
Apostle, we want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight, taking up your time to be here to discuss our cultural identity. Is there any parting comments, maybe something you'd like to say tonight that we didn't ask you?
Those 5 points I said: stay in touch with people from back home, join local clubs with ties to your own old culture, maintain cultural traditions, as we have discussed. Then number 4, share your culture with new friends and colleagues. Do not be ashamed of who you are. Some people are like you spoke about, Brother Pasai, you talked about, how you went to Japan and you put on, your shirt. I even put on this shirt at one time, just like I had that experience at one time. I went to church in the morning and I put on this with the pants, the shirt like this, and somebody said, "Oh, Moses is in his pajamas," I said, this is not a pajama. This is a cultural dressing. This is how we dress in Africa. I said, can you imagine? It's 120 degrees in Africa with a hot sun, and I put on a 3-piece. That is not God's idea. That's why we have shirts like this. The winds will blow through here, and all of that. The person began to understand. Said, "Oh, okay, I see." So you are not ashamed. That person now, later on, they began to ask me for this shirt when summer came. They began to buy it from us because why? I educated the person. Just share your culture with your new friends and other people. Do not be ashamed of it. We have introduced cassava leaves to Americans here, potato greens, and they love it. They like it. Don't be ashamed of it. If the Chinese are not ashamed to open a Chinese restaurant, why can't we open an African restaurant and begin to introduce it to other people, not only people who are from our own background? Then number 5 is volunteer for a nonprofit organization. There are nonprofit organizations that are doing well. For example, I support Samaritan's Purse because they are doing very well in the interior, in most of our own places. Where they are going into some of the interior places, they fix roads for our people. They help our people with cow, with goat, with chicken to begin to develop the protein, all of that. So get involved with organizations are like that. It keeps you connected. Your heart, say your treasure is where your heart is. If your heart is in that culture, you will invest into it. I mean, that's just a parting comment that I wanted to make. But again, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. This was our guest speaker for today, our guest, Robert Apostle Moses Foya, who are discussing our cultural identity. On behalf of Ben, Levi is behind the scene. We'll say thank you to all our viewers. Have a good night or good evening or good morning from wherever you're watching. All right. Bye and thank you.
Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.